Our human brain receives wave frequencies from the field, translates them into particles by collapsing the wave function, projects the results out there, and then processes the inputs that come back through our own sensory perceptions. And it looks like this. This is a very important point. Our senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, are not really sensing some independent reality out there, but in fact are first projecting that reality so that it appears to be out there. It's not just a one-way street of incoming perception, but a two-way street of projection first and then perception. Apparently, once our brain converts the wave frequencies downloaded from the field by collapsing the wave function, it projects the results out there and makes it appear that we are surrounded by a holographic 3D total immersion movie. Once again, as Pribram said, our brains mathematically construct hard reality by relying on input from a frequency domain. Then, and only then, our senses read what has been projected out there and bring that information back to the brain. Here's a video from YouTube produced by a Turkish non-scientist, Adnan Aktar, that has a very good message, but was a very poor English translation. So I rewrote and re-recorded the translation, and that's why it will be my voice that you hear.
We've been taught that the process of seeing is when light clusters, called photons, travel from an object to the eye and pass through the eye where they are refracted and focused on the retina at the back of the eye. Here, these light rays are turned into electrical signals and then transmitted by neurons to the center of vision at the back of the brain. We now know that the opposite is true, that the act of seeing actually takes place in this center in the brain. All the images we view in our lives and all the events we experience are actually experienced in this tiny and dark place. Both the film you are now watching and the boundless landscape you see when you gaze at the horizon actually fit into this place of a few cubic centimeters. These physical facts make us come to an indisputable conclusion. Everything we see, touch, hear, and perceive as matter is only electrical signals in our brain. For instance, we see a bird in the external world. In reality, this bird is not in the external world, but in our brain. The bird we see is in fact the electrical signals in our brain. Likewise, the sounds we hear from the bird are also in our brain. Put simply, the shape and sound of the bird are nothing but the brain's interpretation of electrical signals. This is also true when it comes to distance. Someone who watches the stars in the sky assumes they are millions of light years away from him. Yet the stars are actually inside him, in the center of vision of his brain. While you are watching this film, the truth is that you are not inside the room that you assume yourself to be. On the contrary, the room is inside you. When you see your body, you think you are inside of it. But remember that your body is an image formed inside your brain as well. To imagine matter to have an existence outside the mind is indeed a deception. The perceptions we observe may well be coming from an artificial source. We can understand this better with an example. Let's imagine that we could take our brain out of our body and keep it alive in a glass box. Then let's get a computer filled with information related to a particular setting, such as image, sound, and smell. We'll connect this computer to the brain with electrodes and send the pre-recorded data to the brain. As our brain receives these signals, it will see and live the setting that the computer is transmitting. We could also send signals to the brain from this computer about our own image. For example, we could send the electrical information, such as the sight, hearing, and touch, that we would experience while sitting at a desk. Our brain would perceive that we were a businessman sitting in his office. This imaginary world would continue as long as the information kept coming from the computer, and we would never realize that we were actually a brain sitting in a glass box. It is indeed very easy for us to be deceived into believing that what we are perceiving is real, even though it has no material basis.
We have been conditioned since birth to believe that what we see out there is real, an independent, objective reality that has a life of its own. And our role is limited to observing it and perceiving it and interacting with it. Not so, according to the latest scientific research. We are projecting our reality first and then perceiving it coming back to us. The bird first arrives in our brain as wave frequencies downloaded from the field. The brain then translates those wave frequencies into a hologram of the bird by collapsing the wave function. That hologram is then projected out there so that the bird appears to be real. And then the bird comes back to us through our physical perceptions.
The more you look at something in detail, in what we think of as solid matter, the less and less solid it begins to look.
The only realities we know are the ones our brain manufactures. Our brain receives millions of signals every minute, and we organize them into holograms, which we project outside ourselves and call reality.
It's as if you were sitting in the middle of a movie theater with a white screen 360 degrees all around you, but the movie projected onto that screen was coming from inside your own brain. In other words, although we don't know exactly how this works yet, your brain is the movie projector, and the movie you're watching, that you're totally immersed in, is a hologram and is not real. In 1991, before all this recent research took place, Michael Talbot asked, if the holographic brain model is taken to its logical conclusions, it opens the door on the possibility that objective reality, the world of coffee cups, mountain vistas, elm trees, and table lamps, might not even exist. Is it possible that what is out there is really a vast, resonating symphony of wave forms, a frequency domain that is transformed into the world as we know it only after it enters our brain? Of course, now we know the answer is yes. that's exactly what's happening.
There is no out there, independent of what's going on in here.
Reality is unset jello. That's the way I like to put it. There's this just big indeterminate sludge out there that's our potential life, and there's and that we, by our very act of involvement, our act of noticing, our observation, we get that jello to set. We're intrinsic to the whole process of reality. Our involvement creates that reality. And so we have this involvement in everything. We are our world. There's no out there. We are, there's no place where we end and everything else begins.
David Bohm, you remember him, said that the tangible reality of our everyday lives is really a kind of illusion, like a holographic image. Underlying it is a deeper order of existence, a vast and more primary level of reality that gives birth to all the objects and appearances of our physical world in much the same way that a piece of holographic film gives birth to a hologram. Here are some more quotes from the holographic universe by Michael Talbot. For Pribram, this synthesis made him realize that the objective world does not exist, at least not in the way we are accustomed to believing. What is out there is a vast ocean of waves and frequencies, and reality looks concrete to us only because our brains are able to take this holographic blur and convert it into sticks and stones and other familiar objects that make up our world. If the concreteness of the world is but a secondary reality, and what is out there is actually a holographic blur of frequencies, and if the brain is also a hologram and only processes some of those frequencies out of this blur, what becomes of objective reality? Put quite simply, it ceases to exist. Although we may think we are physical beings moving through a physical world, this is an illusion. We are really receivers floating through a kaleidoscopic sea of frequency. Michael Talbot was clearly ahead of his time, because now we have proof that there is no out there. All there is a holographic 3D total immersion movie which we are projecting so that it appears to be out there. Now the interesting question comes. Is there one big hologram of the universe that we all see and are all part of? Isn't that what is meant by the holographic universe? The answer is no. Each individual must have their own individual and unique hologram they are projecting, their own private reality. Why? Our human brain receives wave frequencies from the field, translates them into particles by collapsing the wave function, projects the results out there, and then processes the inputs that come back through our own sensory touching, are not really sensing some independent reality out there, but in fact are first projecting that reality so that it appears to be out there. It's not just a one-way street of incoming perception, but a two-way street of projection first and then perception. Apparently, once our brain converts the wave frequencies downloaded from the field by collapsing the wave function, it perceptions. And it looks like this. This is a very important point. Our senses, seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, projects the results out there and makes it appear that we are surrounded by a holographic 3D total immersion movie. Once again, as Pribram said, our brains mathematically construct hard realities